2nd, the second day of Alaska Native Plant Month that we're celebrating. I'm Emily Becker, and I work here at Rural Cap, and I'm excited to welcome Molly Cerridwen. She's my friend. She's a really terrific teacher about all things related to plants, among other things. And this program is brought to you today through our work with the Tribes Extension Program, which is out of the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So we are here today to talk about respectful foraging, and we're going to build our discussion around a document published last year by the Kayaani Sisters Council. It's a group of Indigenous women with expertise in foraging for native plants, and the document was created to help educate, inform all of us around how to respectfully gather local plants. They created a series of guidelines, and they're really meant to be discussed, analyzed, shared widely. And that's what we're going to do today, at least a brief little start. And hopefully we can make connections and continue this conversation. And I'm excited. It's kind of a little bit of a small group with some awesome people. So hopefully we can have a robust discussion. And one of the first guidelines they have is to build a deeper understanding and connection to the people on whose land you're harvesting. So if you have a second here, please put in the chat where you're calling in from. And if you know the Indigenous land, put that too. Love to see that. And I'm here in Anchorage. I'm on Dena'ina land. And Molly, I will turn it over to you, and you can introduce yourself more thoroughly.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm really very grateful to be here today. Thank you so much. I also would like to thank the Kayaani Sisterhood themselves for putting together such a wonderful document full of wonderful guidelines that can assist individuals on their path towards food sovereignty and food independence, learning about Alaska Native traditional plants. And before we get into the discussion, I would just like to do a brief introduction of myself, even though Emily is so wonderful and introduced me so well. I just wanted to say that I today am on Dena'ina lands here in Anchorage. And I am very grateful to be on these lands. I've lived here before, but today I'm visiting, and it's a sunny day out almost, but I'll take it. It's springtime weather, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. My name is Molly Cerridwen, and I'm of the Yupik and Irish people. I would like to take a moment to honor my ancestors, both in Nunavut, Alaska, St. Lawrence Island, Alaska, the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, as well as Finland and County Kerry, Ireland. So all of my ancestors who've come before me have instilled within me the desire to learn these plants and the desire to share with as many people who want to learn any of the knowledge that I've gained over my years of experience. It is a privilege to be broadcasting from here. I really would like to stress that. These are unceded lands and full of magic, potent medicine, just literally right in our back door. So to begin our practice of listening and of participating in this webinar, I would like to invite everyone to just take a couple moments, and we're just going to breathe together. And so this active breathing together creates community. And this is a part of traditional healing. This is a part of learning plant medicine. The plants exhale what we inhale. We exhale what the plants inhale. So by consciously breathing with the intention of learning about plants, you're actually feeding the plants that we are going to harvest in the future. So if you can, just place both hands on your heart and close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Soften the mouth, and through the nostrils, take a deep breath in. Open the mouth side out. Softening the shoulders as you do so. Inhale through the nose. Open the mouth. Sigh it out. Soften the shoulders and grow taller through your spine. 2 more times. Recognizing the land that you yourself are residing on and all the people who came before you. You might feel the beat of your heart underneath your hands. I invite you to really embrace that sensation of your own heartbeat. And this time, take a deep breath in. With the mouth closed, we're going to hum our exhale. Deep breath in and hum, exhale. Notice any vibrations in your chest. Inhale again. Exhale, mouth closed, hum, vibration. It doesn't have to be any sound or tone. There's no right or wrong. Whatever it is, and that is okay. One more time, filling up your lungs with this deep breath. And return to your normal breath. Blink your eyes open if they've been closed. And now, welcome. We've officially opened this circle for discussion. I hope that you can take a moment just now to appreciate any differences you might feel in your body. And then when we notice the differences that maybe breath work does within our body, that gives us information to move into the future and have tools in our toolbox to help us. So with that being said, let's open up the discussion.
Yeah, Molly. So I just put, thank you for that. By the way, I always need that. I just dropped in the chat the Respectful Harvesting guidelines. And one of the guidelines that they talk about is preparing yourself spiritually before you begin. So maybe you could talk about that and what that means to you. Maybe we just kind of did that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So you're absolutely right, Emily. Breath work is a practice of spirituality, right? Literally, the medical term for inhaling is called inspiration, and exhaling is expiration, right? And our final breath is always going to be our final exhale, which will be our final expiration. But before that final expiration, we have many moments of inspiration, which is where our breath work comes in and becomes magic, right? When we have time dedicated to focus, not just on ourselves, because sometimes people think of it in a selfish light, like, oh, spirituality, that's a selfish path. Or I prefer to think of it as a healer. I need to take care of myself really, really well so that I may be of service, the best service I can be to my community. And so breath work, pranayama, bumblebee breath, which was that humming, also known as the Brahma Vihara. It's like a heart humming breath. That is a traditional technique from India, from the yogic traditions. But even though I'm a yogic or a Yupik traditional healer, I have studied many different cultures. And what I've learned through the studying of all these cultures is we're more similar than we are different. And even in Yupik sweat lodge, we have breath that cools us off, right? We utilize breath work. In our singing and our drumming, we utilize the ha and the hu, right? This like guttural diaphragmatic breath that cleanses us, and combined with movement is also a part of a spiritual practice. And then getting into the mindset of a spiritual practice is crucial, I believe. It's maybe the most important step in the guidelines of this sustainable harvesting booklet. And that is because when we prepare ourselves with good intention and we have a set outline for the plan, like what we plan to harvest, how much we plan to harvest, who are we harvesting for? Are we harvesting for ourselves? Are we harvesting for our elders, one specific elder, 5? You know, who is that demographic that we're collecting for? And then with that information and tapping into that deeper state of self through spirituality, whatever you want to call it, connecting to source, connecting to the divinity that is within every single one of us, right? Like, you are God, each and every one of you here. I see it in your eyes. It's luminescent, it's glowing through the screen. You are completely unique. And that's a blessing, because that unique God quality within you, when we tap into it using spirituality, we tend to walk the good red road, the path that is most beneficial, not only for ourselves, right? Because then we can let the ego go, but what's good for the community in which we live, what's good for not only our peers, but all of the descendants that are yet to come, right? So definitely important to prepare ourselves. And then in whichever way we prepare ourselves spiritually, getting into a ritual of preparing ourselves before harvesting, right? And that could be getting in that mindset with breath work. It could be drumming, but it could also be those things combined with collecting the supplies that you're going to need. You know, sometimes I sing songs to my gathering supplies. I'm like, you know, singing about how I need to grab my thicker leather gloves when I'm going to go get some Devil's Club. Or I sing about, oh, what size baskets do I need, you know? And the act of me singing is my way through what I've learned in my travels, and also through my mother, is an offering to God, divine, the universe, nature, whatever we want to call it. We really don't have a lot to give back. We can treat the earth well, but one of the things we do have to give back is our voice, right? In whichever way we choose to use it. So choosing to use it mindfully. And so that's why I sing. And your ritual might look totally different. But by incorporating that, and then it becomes a part of your pre-harvesting protocol, then it makes harvesting so much easier, because in essence, it's taking 2 steps of the preparation process, combining it into a container.
Thanks, Molly. And I'm going to encourage anybody to raise your hand, or if you want to unmute yourself and contribute. I'll go here and say that really resonates with me. I know that when it's time, when, you know, spring hits, or anytime there's something to be harvested, there can be like a frantic feeling like, oh, I have to go get it. And it took me a long time to, you know, to think, you know, to really think about how much do I need? What am I doing this for? You know, and just to take a deep breath and really think about that before, you know, going out there. Like, it's birch tapping time, or, you know, hooligan coming up. I mean, these are things where you, taking the time to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and connecting with it, with all your tools and everything else, I think will make it a better experience.
Absolutely. You know, and I agree with that so much. And what that brings to mind for me is I also get that frantic feeling, right? It's like, oh my gosh, Alaskan summer, right? collectively, as Alaskans, we have been trained by the seasons to realize that there is the dark. And then as soon as we start getting these longer days, which I mean, we have long days now, it's past equinox, we're heading towards solstice. Every day we're gaining, and I can really tell a difference. And what I notice is it's this, deep desire to harvest combined with the climate that we happen to have this winter in South Central, which was a lot of snow. So a lot of the plants might be growing, like I can see them 2 ridges over, but it's trudging through 3 feet of punky snow that isn't safe for me to bring my mother to, let alone myself if I'm working on an injury, which personally I am. And so like for my own safety, right, realizing that it's not the right time for me to do that. And it's okay for it not to be the right time. And also realizing that nature is really forgiving. So even though it's birch tapping season, right? And the birch, the water's flowing, the sap is flowing, and it, you can see green on some of the south facing hillsides, right? Especially anytime there've been construction projects, because they fertilize those areas, and those might be the first bits of green we see. And so really what it makes me recognize is when I keep track of my harvesting notes throughout the years, I can look back on last year and say, yeah, I did tap my birch trees around this time. And it was a little slow to start, but then once they started going very quickly. If anyone's tapped, you know what I'm talking about. They are flowing. And I was having gushers until almost late May. So within this month time frame, I was able to collect and harvest a lot of birch sap. But I can this year say, oh, I know that the tap is still going to be running, and maybe even a little later, since there's more snow on the ground, more moisture for the trees to soak up. So I'm going to give myself permission to take a little extra time and allow more snow to melt for my own personal safety before I tap the trees, because even though it's time, it doesn't mean you have to do it then. Right? We have to work within the framework of our own abilities and the abilities of the community if we're doing community projects, right? And speaking of community, I just wanted to give a shout out to my sisters in plant medicine, Trixie Bennett, Ketchikan, Alaska, Louise Brady from Sitka, Alaska, Eva Burke from Nenana, Alaska, Tia Hawley from Soldotna, Alaska, Naomi Michelson from Ketchikan, Alaska, Gloria Simeon from Bethel, Alaska, Disney Williams from Juneau, Alaska, and this was all helped with the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. And within the framework of this 7th Generation Fund, it's also talking about the next 7 generations to come, right? Our children's 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 children, right? What's the world we want to leave for them? And so when we practice respectful harvesting and sustainable harvesting, it actually directly affects the future of the plants.
So Molly, that actually, I wanted to talk about that next, because you mentioned your mom and then the Kayaani Sisters who put together these guidelines. So one of the guidelines is honor and respect your teachers, and how important it is to have a real teacher and not just books and websites. Can you tell us a little bit about your training and the teachers you've had?
Yes, I am so grateful. I feel like I've lived a blessed life who's had the opportunity to come in contact with so many amazing people. And also, I had just a wonderful family that was already working within the world of medicinal plants, healing, and alternative medicine. I if I listed every single teacher, it would be a really long introduction. So I like to just, my original teacher is my mom. I would follow her anywhere from the youngest age. And I was just curious. I would ask what plants we were picking and what it was good for and why. Why was my favorite question, and probably the adult's least favorite question. But now, as I am an adult, it's my favorite question for kids to ask. Oh, why? I love that when kids ask that question, because they want to know how things work, not just that they do. Right. So the modern construct of, modern medicine is that we don't often really understand why we're being prescribed things, or unless we ask the questions, or even when we are prescribed things, what exactly the mechanism with which that prescription medication is doing in our body, like what's the catalyst, right? And so when we learn about plants, and we learn about it in a very systematic and sustained way, then we get to learn how, the hows and the whys of, and the reasoning behind, and how one plant might not be as powerful by itself, but when combined with another, it creates a super plant that is medicine. And so my mother was raised in the tradition of traditional healing. And she grew up in Cordova, Manly Hot Springs, Tecotna. Her mother, my grandmother, was kind of the first generation of my matriarchal line to really like integrate within modern society, white people being more available. She moved into the city being Fairbanks, Alaska, back in, the 40s, as big as that was. And then moving out to Manly Hot Springs to get away from all that chaos of Fairbanks in the 40s. And then my mother carried on to the tradition, much to my pleasure. My elder sister, Jennifer Andrewley, has been one of my greatest teachers and mentors, and continues to be. And through my work with Jennifer, we got the honor to work with Dr. Rita Blumenstein through ANTHC, South Central Foundation. And Dr. Rita will always be near and dear to my heart. And actually within this publication is a quote from her. So I'd like to take a moment and if you'd like to close your eyes to listen to this quote, I feel like by closing one part of our senses, we're able to open the other aspects of our senses, specifically our ears, and it's a way of truly hearing. So this is a quote by Dr. Rita Pitka Blumenstein. We are free to be who we are, to create our own life out of the past and out of the present. We are our ancestors. When we can heal ourselves, we can also heal our ancestors, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, and our children. When we heal ourselves, we heal Mother Earth. Thank you, Dr. Rita. I'm very grateful.
Sorry. Good.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Go on.
I don't want to hog all your time. So I know if you have questions for Molly, please put them in the chat. And Molly, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's perfect. Hopefully it's a question.
Well, I was going to ask you, so if you were new to harvesting, where would somebody start? Like somebody that wanted to, begin harvesting something, what would you recommend they do? How do you find a teacher that can help you?
Yes. And going back to teachers, right? And I barely touched on, I talked about the 3 biggest teachers in my life and didn't even get into my herbalism teacher, right? And so my best advice is if you're really interested in this, in ethnobotany, in learning about plants, especially plants as food and medicine, then my advice is pick one plant, and spend 1 year on it, right? That might seem outrageous. It might seem like a long time, but this is how I learned, right? And the reason it's actually quite intelligent is that you're focusing your energy on one plant, and then you get to follow it through the course of its lifetime. So you get to see what it looks like when it's a baby, when it's flowering, when it's gone to seed, when it's shut down and getting ready for winter, and then maybe even what it looks like during the winter if the aerial parts are above the snow, such as high bush cranberry, right? And if you know those things, those could be life-saving plants. If you're stuck in the winter, you don't have access to clean water, you know, there might be a myriad issues with whatever situation you're in, but knowing these plants, especially, you know, old blueberries or cranberries, could save your lives with their moisture. And then once you're on that path, that dedicated path, right, people will come into your life. It's an inevitability. You will find the people that you need. And the trick is knowing when to say yes, right? So an opportunity might come knocking at your door, and usually those opportunities come knocking at a precipice in your life, usually at a fork in the road when you have to make a decision, either, oh, I either have to get a new job, or I have to move, or, you know, I just broke up with my partner. You know, there can be lots of reasons why our life chooses to change, but usually at that precipice, if we're on a path of knowledge, of learning, of a deeper understanding, then those people, that's the opportunity. People will come into our lives, often good people, but there's occasionally the people out there that, you know, maybe you don't want to invite into your life. So that's where our spiritual practice of really like getting in tune with ourselves, knowing what our neutral is, and then when we're in our neutral and we come across people in our path, we're better able to read them and read, oh, this person might be the best teacher I could ask for, or this person has a lot of information, but perhaps it's not the teacher for me. And sometimes that takes, you know, either apprenticing with them, taking a class with them, try out multiple different people, because there are enough people with this knowledge. And honestly, the more the merrier. Like the more you learn and the more you can share, then you could be a teacher to someone. You could be a teacher to your niece or your nephew, you know, and then carry on this tradition of sustainable harvesting. So coming back to your question about how to find a teacher, put yourself out there, but also just being on the path of the knowledge that you care for, that you have passion for, will bring those people into your life.
Thanks. And I'm just about to drop in the chat here the calendar for Alaska Native Plant Month walks. There's going to be a couple here in Anchorage and then some in Juneau, and I'm sure there'll be some more added as well. So those are, if you're, looking to identify plants, that's, maybe a good option. But, the Sisters Guidelines talks about our plants as teachers too. Could you talk a little bit about that? How are the plants our teachers?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I'm so glad that it's added in this wonderful booklet, right? The plants are, of course, our teachers. There are many different myths across many different cultures about a time before time where we were actually able to hear the plants talk. We were actually able to hear the animals talk. And then we became too far separated from our animal selves, right? That really like almost Neanderthal or, pre-human type existence. We started sculpting tools, and in this process of our own evolution, forgot to listen. And so there has been great forgettings over the course of history. I mean, we can talk about like the burning of the libraries at Alexandria, right? Imagine the information that was in there. That's something we actually know about. Imagine all of the instances of recorded data that we don't know about. And that's why I say, like, here today, by recording this, we're recording for posterity, for future generations to look back and say, hey, at this time, this is what they were talking about. And so really, it's so important to learn to listen. And so when I say learn to listen, I'm not just saying like be a better listener, right? Which a lot of people, yeah, it would benefit. I could benefit from being a better listener. Listening to plants is a little bit different. Listening to plants is very similar to, say, picking one plant for a year and then spending time with that plant. Now, you might not think you're listening when you're spending time with the plant, but indeed you are. You're looking at it, you're observing it, you're noticing differences as the seasons change. And nonverbal communication, even amongst humans, is the majority of our communication. Vocal communication isn't really as dominant, even within humans, as we might think. So that's why innately, even if you don't talk to someone, you might feel more comfortable with them through body language than you would feel if someone was very standoffish and just, maybe didn't look at you. Like that would give you a different impression of that person. And plants have personalities too. They also, there's been a big, gender kind of debate in like culture, right? But we're talking about culture, and when we harvest plants, we're harvesting sexed plants. There are male and female plants, but there are also plants that produce both male and female parts in the same plant. So it's like, if you're looking across nature for examples of variety, you will find it in humans, you will find it in plants, and you will find it in animals, right? And so, like insects are animals, one of the broadest ranges of animals. And so with that, like this learning to listen not only helps support our relationships with the people around us, but it's this quieting of like our ego self, the self we present to the world. And then it's bringing the self that we bring in the private of our own home, that self that's really vulnerable. That's the vibration that plants vibrate at. Plants are vulnerable too. Even though they might have built-in mechanisms to prevent, ultimately we can cut down. We have protective measures. We can cut down most plants. Every plant actually has the ability to be cut down. And so by tuning into this deep listening and bringing this vulnerable aspect of ourselves, we're able to notice these little aspects of the plant. And I'll give you a few examples. So, okay, let's talk about, actually, Emily, you tell me 2 Alaska Native plants that your favorites, and I'll tell you about their personalities, and we can use them as an example.
Well, I'm starting to think about nettles. So that's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yes, nettles. Okay, so for nettles, right, we pick them when they're young for food, right? And then as soon as they produce their purple flowers, they're no longer really used as a food source. You can let them go to seed and you can transplant. But, if you've ever gone nettle collecting, you see it's like you come across them. You don't always see them from a distance, and they're green topped, but it's a very specific color green. And so this is a part of that listening, right? And when you learn to listen and you've got a couple different plants, you can look out on a field, a forest of green, and you can see 15 different shades of green and say, oh, okay, that darker green, that's going to be nettle. And then this lighter green, that's going to be the new fireweed, or it's almost like a reddish, right? And then, you know, maybe that's going to be in a birch forest, which in a birch forest, we're going to have both nettle and fireweed greens. And then maybe some fiddleheads in there. And so like the personality of nettle, yes, it's stinging nettle, but they're super delicate, and it takes very little to take the sting out of it. Traditionally, we would use stinging nettle on pain points. So if you think about acupressure, acupuncture, right, where they're actually sticking needles into your skin for pain relief, you can actually, you know, like tap yourself lightly on your sore spots. A lot of people have shoulder pain between the shoulders, and I've done this myself. So I have, you know, that I've definitely tried it. And it will sting you and create a rash of sorts. But really that's rash is just drawing blood to the area. And if you think about it that way, right? So the act of touching it, the barbs get you if you're not wearing protection. It creates a flushing rash, meaning the blood rushes to the area. When you cook it and eat it, it's blood medicine. It's super high in chlorophyll. It's higher in chlorophyll than almost any other green leafy vegetable that you can buy in the store, like by a lot. It's very high in antioxidants, not to mention the vitamin D, vitamin K, so many. I mean, I can't even list all the nutrients, but it's considered a pot herb, so it grows all over Europe, all over Asia, East Asia, Northern Asia, into Siberia even, and then Alaska, Canada, all across, even into lower climates. And it being a pot herb means that it can be used as food without worrying about poisoning from any of the medicinal constituents, because all of the vitamins are water soluble for the majority, and then the fat soluble vitamins are pretty low, so you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, you could eat nettles every single day as a nutritive, and especially women, very high in iron as well. And so that's kind of like gives you a bit of a person. And then when you flip the leaf over, it's this beautiful purple, right? And so you think of like, oh, okay, purple, we've got this feminine energy, right? Which when we start to listen to our plants, we can kind of, you know, some plants have a dominant feminine energy, a dominant masculine energy, or sometimes they're really neutral. And because nettles are annuals, right? They're going to get to their height in one season, in one summer. They're going to go to seed, go to flower, go to seed, drop their seed. All of the aerial parts above ground are going to die under the snow. And then the next year, new growth comes up, right? This annual plant. And so it also has this very like quick fix kind, you know, like the energy behind a quick turnover versus a perennial. Like a perennial is pretty powerful medicine, and usually you use roots or things like that, make stronger medicines with it, decoctions. But with nettle, although you could make a nettle tincture, you would really use it as like when it's in season, eat as much of it as you can. And then as much as you can store it. And it will like pretty much provide most of the nutrients that you and your family need for the year to come if you harvest enough.
Yeah. It's funny that's one reason I love nettles, is they're so abundant. And then you also mentioned my other favorite, which is fireweed, also super abundant. And then you mentioned fiddleheads, and I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit. You know, I've seen posts on social media, like some, people saying, oh, I'm so excited to go foraging. I've never been foraging. I want to find fiddleheads. And I feel some anxiety, and part of that's my ego talking, like, none of this land is mine. And people have the right to, their own fiddleheads, or everybody has an equal right. I don't know. And I've been out foraging in Kincaid and seen, big people with big bags of fiddleheads. And so I don't really forage them because I feel like there's not enough. I don't know. Tell us what you think about that.
In the Anchorage Bowl, I would advise against harvesting. And I know that there are patches in Kincaid Park where it's great. And there are a lot of both Devil's Club and, I mean, there's a lot of fiddlehead, there's a lot of, but it's relative, right? Like there's a lot right there consolidated within Kincaid Park. But if you were to spread that out over the entire Anchorage Bowl, there's not really that much, and definitely not enough to support the amount of people that are utilizing the area. So what I say to that, and it goes back to a previous question, which is like, how do you start, right? So in answering both those questions, how I would start is, most people who want to get into foraging might already be hiking in certain areas, right? So if you are one of those people that are hiking in areas in Alaska, then surely you've noticed the trails that are really popular and then the trails that are less popular, right? So my advice would go to the less popular trails, and then still don't harvest off of that trail. Any plant you see along the trail should be left for the enjoyment of the people who are walking the trail, right? So that's where we learn environments. And there's many different books where you can learn where plants grow. Like Verna Pratt, I want to say, put together a really good book on where and it's one of my favorite, it was one of my books growing up, learning plants. And she gets really specific into the territory or the region in which the plants are growing. So if you're on a hike and you're doing an elevation change, you're going to go through maybe bog, marshland, then you'll go up to tree line. In that in between, we've got tree plants, right? All of the forest plants. And then above tree line, we go into high alpine desert. Technically, it's a desert. So what I would say is, before you get to the high alpine, before you get to above tree line, you want to find a place that's like an access point into the sides of your trail, right? And then please mark your trail. We don't want to lose you. You don't want to get lost. And then just literally walk off trail at least 100 yards to the side of the trail. And it helps if you kind of know where the trail, because if the trail is eventually going to turn right and you're turning right, then you're really going to end up pretty close to the trail. Ideally, you're going to turn off so that your paths diverge and you're far enough away. And then from there, we go and we get into our place, and it's another chance for spirituality. It's another opportunity for breath work. It's a chance to ask for permission, right? Because not only do we need to ask for permission when we are hiking in state parks, like you can't just go and harvest in state parks. And there's certain limitation in national parks, but state parks have regulations, definitely in the municipality. Native lands have restrictions. You need to get permission from the tribes themselves or the corporations that own the land. So not only when we say ask for permission, are we talking about the entities involved with stewarding the land in question, but also we're talking about literally standing on that land and asking the land for permission. And you will get a feeling. You will feel either welcome or you will feel unwelcome. And if you feel unwelcome, honor that. That is your sixth sense. That is your spirit listening to Mother Earth, right? Because we want to heal her. And doing this respectfully does heal Mother Earth. And so it's an opportunity to really get inside so that we can listen to the vibrations of the earth around us, right? And so, and then once you're there and you've gotten the permission from both the land owning or stewarding entity plus the land itself, then if you've picked one plant, my herbalist teacher used to teach me a meditation, and I still use it to this day, even on plants that I've, say, met before, but it's a way of introducing yourself to your plant. And it's, sitting with that one plant in nature and really looking at it so intensely that your whole world becomes that plant, and then shrink down. Imagine yourself shrinking down to the size of that plant, and then even smaller, so that at the base, wherever that plant meets the earth, there will be a little stem wherever that meets. And then you can imagine a little door, and you can walk up. And of course, now you're this big. So you're going to look up and say, hello, plant. Hello, dandelion. Dandelion was my first plant. I just felt an affinity for it. And I studied it until I, finished the year. And then I picked a new plant. So you can imagine a door at the base of that plant, and you can knock on that door, and you can ask permission even to work with that plant. And sometimes the plant will say, yes, the door opens, and you're like, I'm in. Sometimes the plant, and especially like this is when our ego kind of gets in, and like we want to learn everything too fast. And so some people, it's a certain type of individual where they're maybe more extreme. Maybe they're more apt to do extreme diets or do extreme supplementation or do extreme cleanses or fasts, right? They might be the ones to choose like more intense plants and herbs. And they're the ones who definitely need to ask permission to work with those plants, because those are the ones that have the more likelihood for harm within the body, especially if it's mixed with other plants. And so, yeah, and then the whole time that we harvest, it's like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, right? It's like, it can become mantra, right? You could say, thank you, Valerian, you're so beautiful. Oh, I love how your flowers stink so beautifully. Like you could say, thank you, nettle, I know I'm wearing leather gloves, but I really appreciate all the hard work you do in growing every year for me. And I can come back to these patches and continually harvest, because I don't tell people about the patches I harvest from. That is another important thing. Keep it in the family, keep it in your community, or with people you trust. That's your community, right? And then also, if we ever harvest too much, donate, like give away. You can still process the plants, right? Whatever you pick, you should process. So that means whatever process you're going to do with the plant, and every plant might have just one process or 12 processes, right? Because with nettle, I could blanch it and have it like frozen spinach. I could immediately cook it in a soup or a stir fry. I could make nettle juice and freeze the ice cubes to have for the summer, or just have nettle juice. I could tincture it and make a nettle tincture. I could dry it and make a dried nettle tincture. I could use it raw and do it topically and sting myself. So just within that one plant, many different preparations, but I'm still processing it so that they don't go bad, right? Because the most disrespectful thing we can do is pick a plant and let it go to waste. It's like, sometimes I go to people's refrigerators and I know that they're buying this produce from Fred Meyer or cars or wherever. But if I see your cilantro going bad, I will feel sad. And it's nothing on you. It's just like, it goes back to this ingrained sustainable harvesting. Even what we harvest from the store, we should also be using. And if we're not going to use it, cook it up, give it to a friend in need. We might all know someone who's going through something, cancer treatment, an elder that's sick. Food will not be turned away, like unless there's severe allergies. But even with severe allergies, if you make something with love and you give it out of the kindness and freeness of your heart, other people will enjoy that. And that's food as medicine, and medicine on multi layers, right?
So Molly, you have a good question from Jenna. She asks, what plant would you recommend starting with in the Anchorage area? And also other people, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, because we've just got a few minutes left.
We got about 7 minutes.
Yeah. So what plants would you recommend for Jenna?
So Jenna, I don't like answering that question for people, because I feel like it's so personal, because I feel like we all have different constitutions. We all have different predispositions. We all come from a different specific genetic background. And what that means is the medicine that works for you isn't going to be the medicine that works for me, but my body will literally crave the medicine that works for me. And it's kind of amazing. It's like 3 years ago, I was like, all of a sudden, rhodiola is all I could get out of my head. And and it's an adaptogen. Adaptogens work with stress response. Of course, COVID 3 years ago, of course, my body was craving rhodiola. It made perfect sense when I was really starting to, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to follow through with this feeling I have deep inside to learn this plant. So really, the more important question, I think, is what are the ways in which you're going to get outside this spring? What are the opportunities that you'll have to come across native plants? And then when you do come across the native plant, take a picture of it. That might be, you might pick that plant, but, preferably not, because it's spring. And so give it some time to grow, and maybe even like stick a stick in the ground next to that plant, and you can go visit it again, right? And you can see how it's changed, because that's another way that we can study. We could even study that exact same plant. You could go back with a 5-gallon bucket, and if it's on public land, 5-gallon bucket and a spade, and transplant that plant, put it in your yard so you'll see it every day. And then that's the plant. And, and then when you get excited, it's like, because if I gave you a plant that like isn't really exciting to you, or like there's no real impetus for you to learn about it, then there's no charge to do that, right? And we can only be intellectual to a point. Harvesting and traditional healing is more about getting out of our heads, getting in our bodies, getting in our spirit, and then moving forward. And from that place, our heart space, then we find the right path. We find the right plants. We find the right medicine, right? Because I even within my own family, I've had sisters who, are also in the plant world, and, it's like this plant works amazing for her. And I give it a good go. And I'm like, yeah, this just isn't my medicine. And it's, it takes just that play of playing with plants, and it is play, right? And we can look at it like play. This is adult playtime. We get to play in the soil. We get to, dry plants. If you have a sauna, you can use your sauna as a dryer if you're harvesting lots. And then also, if you're going harvesting and people that used to harvest and are no longer able, like my mother, she's physically not as capable as she was before, I always harvest a little bit extra for her, and I'll actually help her in the processing, because she's got some arthritis in her hands, and And because I harvested the plants, I need to see the processing through to completion to make sure that even if she got tired, the processing would still occur. And so really, you know, that's that practice reciprocity aspect in the guidelines. But it also kind of ties into leaving no trace. So, you know, whatever you bring out there, please bring it back. If you brought it out there, you can definitely bring it back. And usually everything we bring back is going to be lighter than we bring in, except for the plants, right? Except for the plants that we harvest. But we know we're going harvesting, so we prepare for that. And that also means, you know, taking care of the plot of plants that we're harvesting from. So, you know, if you're digging roots out of the soil, maybe press the soil back into place so that the roots aren't exposed to the air, which can change how those plants mature throughout the season. So all of that is connected, very much so.
And Molly, there's one more really good question here. Tyson asks, if, you know, what are some ways we can be respectful if we're not necessarily spiritually oriented?
Yeah, definitely. So the first one that comes to mind is that leaving no trace, right? So that's an act of respect, right? Without being spiritual. So if we tease spirituality out of respect, what is respect? Respect is a form of honoring something or someone because you venerate or appreciate the qualities that they have to bring, right? So we might respect the elders in our life, not because they're elders, but because they're good people who've lived a good life, right? Just as we can respect plants, not just because they're plants, but because they have grown in harmony with us. They've actually changed and evolved alongside humanity. I mean, some of the plants don't even look anything like what our ancestors' plants looked like, especially our agriculture plants. And so, you know, an act of respect would be taking care of the land and not maybe taking out any wording as far as Mother Earth or you know, Gaia or any of the terms for Earth just being Earth being the only rock left in our solar system that we know of that will sustain our life. So it's like, it's our life support system. And at that point, I totally respect Earth just as a rock floating in space. I respect Earth because I know that scientists have been looking for years for another habitable planet that humanity could survive on. And they still haven't quite found it. And if they have, it's like, oh, it's so far away, like we couldn't get to it, right? Or we don't really know. So it's like, just for that reason alone, that garners respect, in my opinion, right? But respect is often earned. So we can't just say, oh, yes, I respect it, let's go in. It's, you know, with thanks, with appreciation, with gratitude, we approach a task at hand, and that is respectful.
So Molly, we'll probably have to stop there.
Okay.
I'm so glad I'm on this rock floating through space with you today.
Yeah. We're spinning so fast.
I know, we're moving real fast. Just can't see it, can't feel it. Thanks everybody for coming. And as always, if you have follow-up questions or things, just let us know. We're happy to reach out to you. Thanks, Tegan.
Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you, Iva. Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate you both and everyone who attended. Koyana.